And my best friend was like, you think you accidentally sold 2 companies? Like, are you kidding me?
Maybe there's someone else out there might have 30% more skills, but it doesn't matter. You still need to claim that spot for yourself because
Yeah.
otherwise someone else will take it.
After some of my biggest victories is when I felt the strongest imposter syndrome. Am I the person that can sell my business? This is totally crazy. I never thought this would happen. You have to get rid of all the images you have of the woman who says, I just posted this one thing and I made 100 million last month. She didn't. You can build a 7-figure business. This is like the number one thing for women where we mess up is
This conversation is all about what it actually takes to build generational wealth and the 5-power move that your business needs in order to scale bigger. And so, welcome to the show, Beth. You went from building and selling to consulting firm for over 40 million with your business partner and also raising 9 kids in between the two of you, if I understand correctly, right? And so you must have been wearing like 10,000 different hats in that process and managing so many facets of yourself. And I know that you preach that embracing every single facet of yourself gets you actually further ahead. So how did that actually look like for you to be able to do that while building on this scale?
Yeah, so I was super lucky in that I was brought up in an entrepreneurial family. And even though I was the only girl, super ethnic, traditional Italian, my dad was very supportive of me being an entrepreneur. So that was helpful. And so I never thought I would be anything else. But the sort of strange part is I was going to be a mom too. And I had a really hard time getting pregnant, so I adopted my first son, who's so super amazing. And then I used IVF for my 3 daughters. So I sort of went after both really hard. And I think that women are super capable of doing that. And somewhere in my head, I just refused to say I'm going to be an entrepreneur because I wanted my family to have financial freedom. And I loved being in control of my own work life. I was a terrible employee.
That's a great aspect to have. That's a great aspect to have, I think, as an entrepreneur.
You know, I was talking to a woman yesterday on that subject, and she said, and I couldn't believe it. She had a boss that said, I know you'll always get it done, but you'll never do it within the time frame, the parameters, or the approach that I would take, and that's okay. And I thought, that's amazing. Like, what boss would say that? They're like lined up to tell you what a terrible employee I was for sure. But I think you're right. I think as an entrepreneur, and certainly as a mom or an aspiring mom, I think we're not willing to say, I can't do this, or I'm going to be a lesser mom because I'm an entrepreneur. And I think that goes into the whole reason we're terrible employees, because there's not one way to do the job that we want to do. And we're always like kind of trying to find a path that works for us, and then it works for a couple weeks, then we try something else. I mean, I think there's a flexibility that we have to have as moms and entrepreneurs that probably is not something you need to have as an employee, and they probably don't even want you to have it. So my path was, I kind of bumbled into it, if that makes sense. Like, I just assumed I could do it. And like nobody around me told me I couldn't. And I think the blessing of not having so much social media as we have right now, which is when I was starting my first business, is I wasn't barraged with images constantly of work-life balance and how difficult it was. I just sort of bumbled my way and thought, this will probably work. Let me try it. And luckily, I met this beautiful business partner and best friend who thought the same thing. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting nowadays to have always something to compare yourself to and always look up to at the same time. It can push you further along, but it can also get into that comparison trap of always thinking everyone's doing more than you. And the reality is you don't really know what their life is. You don't really know like what it looks like in real life and everything. So I think that's great that you got to have that advantage in a way that you didn't need to look at everybody else around you, because I think like the more you focus on the other people's vision, the less you can build your own, and the
That's
less fast it can grow.
No, that is exactly right. And there's we wrote this book which is coming out in September called Entrepreneur Like a Mother, and there's a chapter in it about mindset. And one of our pieces on mindset is just during this period when you're launching and building, you better curate your social media incredibly well. Like, you have to get rid of all the images you have of the woman who says, I just posted this one thing and I got made 100 million last month. She didn't, and you can't, right? So if I feel like even I am barraged with those images, and I have to remind myself, no, I know what I made, I know what it takes, etc. So that's one of our rules, which is, as hard as it is, like, curate the hell out of what you see every day. Limit your time, right? Which we all try and do, but also curate so that you're getting really like true people you believe, people who motivate you. And man, get rid of everybody else during that time period, because you'll have a really hard time with the entrepreneurial mindset if you're watching someone else's path, as you said.
Yeah, and it's funny because I see the same phenomenon happening in the content realm, in the social media realm, because it's so frequent that I will see a lot of people that kind of get immersed in other people's content and world, and then they kind of lose focus of their own personal brand and what they stand for and everything. And that is literally the thing that makes them so unique and so different, and the reason why people pick them over someone else. And I think that's like part of overconsumption, and being
Yeah.
able to consume more of your own thought and your own ideas and your own brand, and not everybody else's, because then you kind of become a diluted version of someone else's brand, and that is not powerful, right? What is powerful is being able
Yeah.
to stand your ground, and I think it's like a muscle that everyone has to
Yeah.
build, right? It's like a muscle. You need to always practice it and be able to be in this high CO frequency of like you're so certain. You're so like you have this certainty, right?
Yeah. Like, in the mindset piece that I still do it. I think about it. I'm always writing down what I think I can do. And if I have the moments where I haven't curated well and I just saw like 57 feeds from people who are doing what I'm doing so much better in my mind, I like shut everything down. I write down the one thing that reminds me that I have been successful or I have overcome something, and then I kind of go on from there. The more you're fed that, you're right, you lose your personal brand. And I think another application of that is when you're building a business, the more you dwell on what your competitors are doing, like, it sounds really smart that you're so deep in your competitors, but really, if you've got this secret sauce that's you or your strategy, man, I think looking at competitors too much, I think you lose your way.
Yes, the more that you can focus on yourself, the more that you create what makes it so that you have the secret sauce.
Right, your secret sauce. If you believe in it that much, that you've started your own business, that you are selling it and you're delivering it and you know it's working, then that's your validation. And I always felt like, even in my own businesses, because I'm hyper competitive and I would go down such a deep rabbit hole of our competitors, I'm not sure it ever really did me any good. It actually made me question my own brand.
Yeah, I think it's all about like putting your blindfolds on and keeping yourself focused on what it is that you are building.
I would have imposter syndrome. Like, I still have it in my 50s, right? And I have sold two businesses. I'm at a great spot in my life. I still will have it. I will like get on to speak on a panel and still think, why are these people even here to hear anything from me? So what I learned, right, was, okay, if I can just take a step back, I can, number one, remember, oh, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and this is why I'm really good at it. And then my second part is, here's an exact example that proves how good I am at what I'm trying to do. Maybe it's a client, maybe it's an article, maybe it's media, whatever it is that goes through my head where I say, well, wait, that is a validation of my secret sauce, and my secret sauce works. So I'm just going to go out on that stage and I'm going to talk about my secret sauce. But sometimes it's just like, a mini step back where you really process and think. It's not, and if you don't do that, that's when I think panic attacks, or you start to fail, or you go down a social media hole or a competitive hole. I made a really big switch between the first and the second company. On the first, I took sort of pride in working as much as I was working. And I thought, if I just work another hour, I'm going to make another whatever $1,000, and I'm going to get another client, etc. And I think with the second, and kids really force this on you, so I was blessed to have kids that sort of nicely forced it on me. But I just decided every day that I was going to not just write my work to-do list, I was going to write out my personal non-negotiable. And maybe it was just as simple as, I'm going to sit with Ava before she goes to sleep because she has been having nightmares. And as simple as that sounds, first of all, sometimes I had to change my entire day to figure out how I could do it. And there's something empowering about the fact that, number one, you control your schedule enough that you can do that. And number two, that like, that's your power. So, I mean, I did kind of crazy things. Like at the time I lived in Chicago, and I would take a 6 a.m. flight to San Francisco. I would do 3 meetings, and I would fly home that same day, so that in the morning I could be there to like drop my kid off at school or something like that. So,
Yeah.
part of it is like,
Yeah.
women, we just have superpowers. Like, we can do it. Guys would be like off for 3 weeks, whining, control, and I love men, but they would be.
Yeah.
Whereas women are like, yep, got her done. So I think the burnout, for me, it's a very mental thing. And I think you don't get burned out as much if you feel you are in control. Like, you are the ones making the decision of what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And somehow that kind of
Yeah.
lessens the feeling of burnout.
Yeah, I think even I can speak for myself when I say that. I think the burnout that I faced when it came to my business was just having this feeling that my business was dragging me instead of me setting the tone for my business. And also from where I was operating from a place of, I want to prove that I'm successful. I want to prove to my family, to my
Yes.
parents, that I want to prove to everyone, look, I'm not a failure, right? And I think once I started to realize these things and how draining that was, I could switch it around and truly only operate from my passion, which is like, it's just funny because that's what your business is built upon the whole entire time. But I think like when you start becoming more intentional with it, it starts fueling you more than it takes from you. And that's when you get to set the tone. You get to do the things, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you're like, this is just what I want.
And I love what you just said, because I think it's so powerful. That idea of the voice in your head, there's some belief that we have that we don't control that voice. But like, as you just said, we do control it. It can say, I'm a failure, I'm not moving fast enough, people in my life will think I can't really do this. Or you can do what you did, which is, no, today I think I can do it. And it's funny because yesterday I had one of those days, exactly what you said, which is where the business was controlling me, I wasn't controlling it. And I mean, I don't have to work, right? So I was in the absolute worst mood by the end of my day because the business controlled me. I was on the phone the whole time. I didn't get anything done the way I wanted it to get done. And it's funny because with my wisdom in age came, before I got up from working, I literally wrote out how today was going to be different and the 2 things I was going to do to be different. I canceled a couple meetings. I just took back control. And it's such a good feeling versus, and I think that's where burnout comes from, when you aren't able to take control and say, okay, my voice in my head today is going to be a good one. It's going to be a positive one. And the day that I have in front of me is going to be the one I have chosen. That took me, of course, 55 years to learn. So good luck you learning it
Yeah,
earlier.
we're gonna take that, put it in our toolbox.
Yes, if you could take that
forget
out earlier, that would be much better.
It's interesting because I heard a quote the other day listening to a podcast actually, and the girl said, when you reach your goal, sometimes it doesn't feel that big because all along it wasn't your obligation or something like that, something along those lines. And I think that's so true that sometimes we don't even realize how much we accomplish, or I don't know, we just don't realize how much we're doing or
Yep.
like what we're achieving because it is just like our it's just a standard.
Oh, there's a great section. There's a great quote in the book, which is something I remember completely. That with the first business, all I wanted to do was get to $1 million. I thought, man, if you can get to $1 million, everything's going to be better. And then I remember reaching it, but I don't remember reaching it because by the time you get close to the goal, we are so ambitious as women. That goal that seemed like a stretch goal, you don't even think about it. Then you're like, how do I get to 3 million? How do I get to 5 million? Whatever this is. So the one thing I really talk about mindset in the book is take your victory laps, even though it's hard. Take your victory lap because exactly what you said, like a lot went into that. Everything you did for a period of time went into that. You need to take that victory lap, and that doesn't mean you can't have a really aggressive next goal. But so many of my mistakes and like just the way I looked at my business and the world was because I didn't stop, say, wow, that's a great goal. Now what's next? I just like ran right past it and didn't think about it. So
Yeah, I think it's a common thing, I think we just need to take more credit for what we get to do, because we're
yeah.
so in it.
And
We're
by the
we're
way,
just so in it.
guys do. I think men are, and I have one son and three daughters, so I get to watch it like that too. Men are great at taking that victory lap. Man, they are great at the pat on the back. Women, we suck. We have to do it to each other because we don't do it to ourselves.
Your first business that you build with your partner and like you sold, what allowed you to separate your business from one that plateaued versus one that skyrocketed to being able to sell it for 40 million?
Yeah, I mean, there's a really big difference between the first and second business. The first sold for much, much, much less than that, right? But the, I think there's a couple things. One is we did plateau. We did have periods where we didn't grow. And instead of sort of giving up or accepting that as the status quo, we did a series of micro and sometimes macro pivots to try and restart growth. So I think number one is we were incredibly cognizant of growth. We were always watching on the dashboard, and we just were willing to make mistakes and try something and pivot again and try something else and do something no one else was willing to do in the industry. And what I learned between kind of the first and the second business was in the first business, I was always looking backwards when the business plateaued, and I was still like searching out for why the hell did that happen. I was seeing it too late. Well, in the second business, Victoria became this like amazing wizard at a sales pipeline dashboard. And instead of seeing it when the pipeline went down, we had this math that said X number of touches, X number of meetings, X number of whatever gets us our revenue target for the month. And so she would see very early on that at the beginning of the funnel, we were failing and we would be immediately tweaking. Whereas the first business, we had to sit there for 3 months and be like, oh my God, can we even make payroll before we did something aggressive to change it? The second one, we figured it out. And I think data was big. And the other thing was, in the second business, I was super confident, whether I should have been or not. I knew I had done it before and I thought, well, hell, I can do this again. So I was a lot more willing to take bigger strategy chances. And what ultimately got us the multiple for the business that we were in is we guessed right on a trend and we invested. We built a team to consult on that trend. So when that thing hit, our competitors didn't have teams. We got hired by everyone and we had a real year and a half where people were very far behind us, and so we were able to grow. I wasn't smart enough to do that in the first business, and I wasn't confident enough to take a pivot and go, what the hell, let's try. There's a great section of the book, and it's all over the book because my partner and I do this all the time. When we can't figure out the answer to a problem, we have the whole pattern. We identify it, then we bitch at each other for several weeks, and then we hang up the phone on each other, and then one calls the other and goes, let's do the exact opposite. And I swear to God, it works. I mean, it's so funny, but we now know our pattern because, we're working together now. We know our pattern of we fight, we quibble, we get pissed off, we hang up the phone, and then one of us goes, Okay, let's try the exact opposite. Let's go this way instead of that way. And honestly, we found most of the time that works. And embracing that as part of the process. Like that's just what I do as an entrepreneur. Half of my things work out and half of my things are utter failures. Like I used to have a list of stop. I mean, and I stole this. I found out later I stole it from Mel Robbins, even though I hadn't read about it first. She has this stop, start, continue, and it's the way that she thinks about your New Year's resolution. That's not how I thought about it. I did it in the business. Every month I'd be like, okay, I'm going to stop doing this because this is an utter failure. I'm going to start doing this because I think it might work. And this one little nugget of thing that looks like it's working, I'm going to continue and double down on that. I thought it was a great way to look at the business because then there's always an assumption that yes, you are starting something, but you are stopping something. And if you stopped it, it's a mistake. So it's like this ongoing thing that you already know you're going to stop some stuff versus, oh God, I've made a mistake. I can't make it in this business.
Yeah, and just seeing it as part of the process. And you are like someone very overcritical or very like perfectionist or very like you overthink a lot. I think like it can be like definitely a challenge. And I know that I've had to go through that as well. Like I'm a chronic overthinker of like everything. And it's kind of like it gets in my own way sometimes, and I just had to move past that and be like, this is part of the process of just try shit. What works, we do it, like you said, double down, and what doesn't is just part of the process.
Probably helps your way in and out of problems in a way you could not be if you weren't an overthinker. So, like, I have decided to embrace that about myself, that I am an overthinker, and I've surrounded myself with people who call me out. I mean, when I have to think for 4.5 hours about what I'm going to have for dinner, like, is that a worthy thing to overthink about versus like a strategy shift that is? So I have given a few people in my life absolute permission to say, you are overthinking, stop it right now. So I think we have to embrace that.
Yeah. And also, I'd love to bring up your 5 power move framework that you've mentioned that you wish you would have had when you were scaling bigger, and that you wish would have implemented sooner, basically.
And it's really what we learned with the second business. And so I'll give like a fast overview of it. And our newsletter, which I think you'll put in the show notes, which is free, has a really good explanation and examples. But I mean, the first thing, and this is like the number one thing for women where we mess up, is to make sure that the business you've chosen is not a passion project for you. It's actually a business. You've looked at the addressable market. You figured out you can build a 7-figure business, even though maybe ultimately that's not what you want, or maybe you want a $50 million business. Who knows? But the first thing we do as women, we're like, we're passionate about this. I'm not sure it matters. You can be passionate about your hobbies. You got to have a business that can scale the way that you need it to. The second is when you're building your business plan, we want to introduce our product or service when it's perfect, but none of the smart people do that. They introduce what we call an MVP, the most viable product you got at that point, and it could be a product or service. We did it on the service offering. We did it on consulting offerings, and it's that you are willing to go out like 3/4 naked with a product or service and test the market and try it and pivot and pivot and pivot from there. And I know, again, women, because we're overthinkers and we're perfectionists, we want what we introduce in the market to be perfect. No one else does it. It's not a good business strategy, and you are not capable yourself of coming up with the single perfect product. You need lots and lots of feedback. So that's the second part. The third is just on general business pivoting, which is you're going to grow and grow and grow, and then you're not. And at the moment you're not, you need to put your ego aside and pivot, big or small, but you have to be ready to and accept it. It's the discussion we just had. The fourth is about numbers, which is, some women love math, some women do not. But the idea of two things, not just always knowing the numbers of your business, but second, knowing your personal numbers. So we set financial non-negotiables that we stuck with. Ours in the first business when we didn't have any money were really different than in the second business when we had money. But the second business needed a significant investment. I had the cash. Victoria had to borrow against her 401k. And she tells you in the book that that is breaking her financial non-negotiable. And it was a terrible decision, although she was able to pay it back. So there are certain things where you just say, I'm not willing to take on this much debt, or I'm not willing to part with my like little safety net, whatever it is, and then you got to stick with it. And then the fifth is on scaling. And what we this is a great topic. It's in the newsletter. All the stuff is free and it's really good stuff. But the point on scaling is that don't you move an inch on scaling until you have identified you, the CEO's position, and what it's going to be in a scaled business. And we as women, because we are super control freaks, we are perfectionists, we are the only ones that can do the thing that we are selling. We decide that when we scale, we're going to keep on the same role. And the very strong, and there's great stories in there, and there's great frameworks on how to do it. But don't you bother scaling unless you are willing to change your role as a CEO. And yes, that means delegate. And yes, that means get uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just impossible to to do that without, also changing certain aspects of your identity and your roles, and kind of like what we talked about in the beginning, which is being able to like change hat and not wear the same hat for the rest of your life.
No, that's right, because you also get bored and burnt out. I mean, one of the biggest switches when you start to scale as a CEO is that first of all, you're never comfortable with the business because people aren't doing it exactly the way that you want to. But it's exactly what you just said on identity. Your identity, when you scale, you are suddenly not the chief fixer, right? You are suddenly not, everybody in the firm doesn't come to you with their problems. And there were times, the bigger that we got, where my office was quiet and people weren't walking in, and I thought, everything's going to hell. We're going bankrupt. But in fact, it was that the business was running better and they needed me in the acute moments when I was probably best. But man, it's exactly what you said. You have to change your identity within your own company. And that there's an ego side to it, but there's also like a confidence side to it, you know?
Yes, yes. I think like that is the biggest thing, is being able to almost step into a new identity that you haven't yet fully stepped into, and being able to take that on before you feel like you are that person.
As in any of the big things you do in your life, you're never prepared. I will never forget the first time with the first business, potential acquirer came on, and I just thought, am I ready for this? Like, am I the person that can sell my business? This is totally crazy. I never thought this would happen. And you really you make a decision at that point, you are going to take the big step. And I was like, yes, you're one of many people looking at the business right now. This was not true at all. No one was, but you took on a persona before you had
I think
it.
it's just about being able to always constantly push through all of the new imposter syndrome that you run into, because it just never stops. It only stops if you get comfortable.
Yes, but I felt like the interesting thing for me was that after some of my biggest victories is when I felt the strongest imposter syndrome, which makes no sense whatsoever, right? But you just
Yeah, it's like
you have to
you're
just
waiting
be
for the
reminding
proof.
yourself. Yes, I remember after the second business thinking about what I was going to do next and talking to someone, and I was like, maybe it was just a lark. And my best friend was like, I'm sorry, you think both of them were a lark? You think you accidentally sold two companies? Like, are you kidding me? And I had to say it out loud, where I was like, okay, I see your point. I might be good at that little thing.
You need to take the credit for what you do, and I think that's just also something to practice too.
Oh, that's a really good point. You are right. Writing it down, saying it out loud, saying it in a safe space, and figuring out a way that you can say it and take credit for it without becoming that egotistical person we all hate. I mean, you're right. It's like you getting comfortable with it, right?
I think it's also about being okay not being so humble and digestible. Another part of that is also that fear of like, well, I'm going to be less relatable. I'm going to be less like everybody else around me or something. Or, like it's kind of
I'm
like
going to
this
stand
feeling of
out
like,
and maybe I don't want to.
yes, yes, exactly. It's like being able to have this spotlight even bigger on yourself and like loving it, not being like, oh, I need to hide it away or I need to be more digestible or more relatable. It's like, no,
Yeah.
no, don't be relatable.
This is kind of funny, but I have a big Italian family, right? I have tons of cousins and everybody's in your face all the time. Well, I never took that spotlight in the family. I never talked about anything. And then there was a newspaper article about the second sale, and my cousins were like, "What the hell, Beth? You never talked about this." And I kind of realized, like, it's exactly what you said. I didn't want to call attention to myself, but like, why not? Why was I minimizing what I was doing? It was pretty cool.
Hmm.
Especially in
Yeah.
a safe place, which is my cousins are a total safe place. I think you're exactly right. Like, in our attempt not to put the spotlight on ourselves, are we sure we aren't diminishing ourselves?
Yeah, I think this is also another part that comes with, especially when you are putting yourself out there and building your reputation and becoming the go-to in your field. Like it's about being able to inevitably not just have your client think that, but like address the whole world and say, hey, like I
Mm-hmm.
am this good at doing this, right? And I think it's also a bit of the fear that I see of people thinking, well, maybe someone else out there is doing it better than me, or maybe there's someone else out there
Yep.
that might have this 30% more skill than me. And it's like, but it doesn't matter. Like,
Doesn't matter.
and at the end of the day, it's like you still need to claim that spot for yourself because otherwise someone else will take it.
And your prospective client needs to hear you do that, right?
Hmm.
Because you want them to hear you do it and say, oh my God, I got to work with her. And
Hmm.
even if we don't want it for our own ego, we want those clients, we want those customers, we want people buying our stuff. And so again, maybe you feel like an imposter, but you've got to get out there and claim. I love how you said it, like claim what we know better than anyone and how we can help you better than anyone.
I think maybe a lot of people can be scared sometimes of like the clashback or what are the insecurities that you're letting leak out of you, and really calling back to that secure, like high frequency CO that you can embody and that you
Yep.
can step
Yep.
into and really ground yourself and your expertise and be okay that this you are this good and you get to say that you're that good.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think women are less likely to do that than men. And I think every day we need to write on our whatever sits in front of us all day is the reminder that we are great. And that I always tell my kids this: look where you were a year ago. If the you of you 1 year ago saw what you were doing now, wouldn't they be impressed? Okay, great. So you're doing just fine. And 1 year from now, you're going to be amazed at that as well.
Also, for building your business, I think it's really important too to have it fit your life and finding the model that works for you and not someone else, because I think there's so many big fish in the industry, that in the online space that everyone look up to, and then they have a certain way of doing their business and running their business and thinking the way that they think. And I think it can be easy for a lot of people to kind of get soaked into that and get influenced by, oh, well, these people are very successful and this is how they are running their business. So I should try this too. And then you get further and further away from actually curating the business that genuinely tailors to your life and the
Yeah.
lifestyle that you wish to have alongside your business.
I think that's right. And I think the buyer sniffs out a lack of authenticity, right? So you try and be like the big influencer, and that's not authentic to you. A buyer knows that. I always felt like in consulting, I got the clients that were the best clients for me. If I had a potential client that liked someone who was outspoken and would challenge the status quo, Like, I got that client. They loved me because that was my persona and that's kind of who I am. But the client who wanted a rubber stamp, I mean, they talked to me, but they never hired me because I think me attempting to be a rubber stamp was not authentic and they didn't buy it. So, not only does it feel good for you to be authentic, but it's your buyer, your follower, your listener, whoever's buying from you, like they are going to sniff out what's you and what's not you.
I've seen it time and time again where it's like, oh, but this person's doing this person's doing this. Maybe I should implement this. Maybe I should change my strategy like this. Maybe I should change my content like this. And it's less about what is the best way, and it's more what is the right way that works for you and that you are able to not only sustain, but you're able to scale and that you are deeply happy with. And it doesn't drain you out.
Yeah. I do think you have to get comfortable listening to advice and then thinking that's right for me and that's not.
Yeah, I think it's always about taking the advice but filtering it through your own lens and your own wants and priorities because it's going to look so different. Like for example, you look at Alex Hormozy, which is like,
I know.
Go always grind 24/7, and it's like,
and when you find someone who gives you advice that works for you, you are doubling down on that person. And when you find someone who gives you advice that does not, you either mute them or, like certain members of my family, I listen, but not completely. And there's lots of different ways to make money and get to financial freedom that are not grind 24/7 and don't talk to your kids, don't talk to your friends, and just sit in your hole all day. So there's that way too. But
yeah,
but the whole point of like why we put out so much of the content for free and the book is just, could someone read this, a woman, so they know there's lots of ways to make a lot of money, not just the one you hear about.
Yeah, and when does your book comes out?
In September of 2026, so we're getting there.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
That was so much fun, Malika. I wish you such great luck, and I love your topics, and I love the way you look at the world. I think you're right on. Go on at Female Mavericks on Instagram, and you can either see entertaining short-term content, or you can click into the link tree, see our Founders File newsletter, and you can subscribe. And not only do we not charge for it, we never will charge for it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in into today's episode. If you did love it, make sure to share it with someone, share it with a friend. And as always, I'll meet you back here in a week. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in, and don't forget to leave your 5-star rate and review on the podcast. I'd love to know what you guys think of the episodes, and I will meet you here next week.